Hello! I began my previous movie with some geomagnetic storms which didn't appear on the KP index chart. This time I will start with geomagnetic disturbances which were noticed by SWPC. On December 7th, KP index was elevated to 5 points twice. And this time we can actually see the geomagnetic disturbances on readings from ground magnetometers. In Kiruna, jolts exceeded 500 nanoteslas. But notice that those two events affected different components of geomagnetic field. First one affected the X orientation, while second one disturbed the Z component. And to make it more funny, disturbance which is taking place at the time when I'm recording this movie influenced mostly the Y component. Jolt, which was recorded around midnight, can be connected with the first red bar on satellite environment plot. Rest of disturbances took place after 12 UTC, when KP index reached 5 for second time. In Canada, the midnight jolt was recorded only in one station. However, around 12 UTC, much stronger disturbances were recorded by most magnetometers in this region. This can explain the second elevation of KP index. During the day, POES satellite recorded two significant outbursts of auroras. First one took place at 8:30 UTC, and at this time auroral power jumped rapidly to 137 gigawatts. Second event, which took place just before 12 UTC, was even stronger. Strength of auroras grew to 157 gigawatts. All of this was of course caused by the impact of coronal hole stream. Velocity of solar wind grew almost twice and reached 800 kilometers per second. This is enough to trigger a geomagnetic storm. Even if the IMF remained quite stable during December 7. And now let's look at the visual effects of recent geomagnetic instabilities. Quite spectacular. Besides the geomagnetic disturbances, couple other interesting events took place on the same day. One of them was a backside gust of neutron particles, which was recorded on radiation belt monitor between 6 and 9 UTC. Just like last time, the gust caused a compression of plasma sphere on the night side, but it wasn't rather connected with geomagnetic pulsation. However, the effect can be seen as well on the HMF2 monitor, where the height of electrons in ionosphere dropped visibly at the time of gust. From 620 to 460 kilometers. Another interesting events can be seen on current ring monitors, where we can see two different discharges which took place in short period of time. First one happened actually just before midnight. Now let's add some contrast to the image. Look at this geomagnetic jolt which was recorded in Kiruna on December 9th around 1st UTC. Strength of local magnetic field dropped by 700 nanoteslas and the K index reached 7. That's one of the strongest pulses which I've seen on this site. However, even if the geomagnetic disturbance was stronger than the ones which I was showing you in the beginning of this movie, specialists from SWPC didn't care about it during the estimation of KP index, which was elevated only to 4 at this time. If you would like to know why their estimation is so low, simply look at a solar wind readings from this period of time. Professional scientists have to be pretty confused by the lack of any visible space weather activity which would explain such strong disturbance. Even if the BZ component was negative at this time, its magnitude was too low to trigger a geomagnetic storm. To finish nicely this subject, check out the second impulse which is taking place at the time when I'm recording this movie. It might be even stronger than the first one. Check out the auroras in Kiruna. According to SWPC, there wasn't any geomagnetic storms during this time. KP index was at 3, but it was elevated to 4 1 hour later. But this show took place through the entire evening. But this is the time to talk about some serious problems. But first, let's look at this movie, which was uploaded by me on April 15th, 2013. Around 1 month since I've made my first movie about space weather disturbances. At this time I was like a small child who got into toy factory. However, even if I started to play with them without reading the instructions, couple things was clear to me from the very beginning. This is the movie in which I've made my first statements regarding the plasma outflows. And guess what? My claims didn't change too much from that time. Of course, my first attempts to explain the process were like first steps in absolute darkness. However, all the time it was clear to me that those outflows are one of the most important factors which shape the environment of our planet. But since yesterday, I didn't know how much important it is. Anyway, 2 days later, I've learned that my observations aren't new to the world of science. In this episode, I've learned couple very important terms which you can hear quite often in my movies. Magnetic reconnection, flux transfer event, and my favorite one, flux tube. But before I will move further, I need to give you one advice. Do not trust me. Did you hear it, D5U NCR? I doubt it. I want you to question everything what I'm going to tell you. I've told it many times before and I will repeat it once more. I'm not an educated astrophysicist. I've already made so many mistakes that I can't even count them. I demand you to check each information I'm giving you. Looking for information was never so easy as it is now. Use your brains or fingers and make some research by your own. There are people who will eat each shit if it will be served with some nice dressing. Do you want to be like them? If some of you would make a small research at the time when I was talking about atomic oxygen, I wouldn't have now to correct one of my biggest mistakes. Haloscorp, where were you when I've told that those particles are charged negatively? This is total bullshit. Well, D5 lost another chance to catch me being wrong, and I've had to debunk myself. Atomic oxygen can be written as O+, because it has positive charge. And this makes a huge difference. Since I've started to research those plasma outflows, I've told many times that those plasma bubbles, which are actually called plasmoids, contain mostly particles with positive electric charge. And oxygen is one of them. Thanks to Dr. Strong, I've learned that nitrogen ions follow very similar pattern. Nitrogen and oxygen are the main components of the atmosphere and air which we're breathing. Oxygen and nitrogen ions, which in big part make the ionosphere, are trapped by the magnetic field of our planet, which prevent them from leaving the magnetosphere. And this can lead to a disturbing conclusion. But it wasn't me who figured it out. This scientific publication became public on 15 May 2014. Its title tells everything about the subject. Oxygen escaped from the Earth during geomagnetic reversals. Implications to mass extinction. In this research, a group of scientists proves that during the pole shifts which took place in the past, there were mass extinctions of animals connected with the outflow of oxygen. But I would like to show you this image. First, look at the example B, which shows a typical Earth-like plasma outflow. Example C shows how the outflow looked like in the case of Mars. The biggest part of image is covered by example A, which shows the simulated plasma outflow from Earth during the pole reversal, when the geomagnetic field is weak. Listen to the comment. Earth will also have a Mars-like ion escape when Earth's dynamo is substantially weakened. Collapse of the dipole during its polarity reversal reduces the size of magnetosphere, thus also causes a transition from Earth-like ion escape to the Mars-like. But the example A is important for another reason. If you are watching my movies for some time already, you should notice something what might get you worried. This image looks very similar to the readings from SWMF magnetosphere monitors, which I'm showing you almost in every movie. It wasn't long ago when I explained the frontal cusp which appears in the magnetosphere each day. This image shows it as well, just as other additional breaches which allow the ions to escape from the ionosphere. But the best option will be to check the MHD simulation which I've requested some time ago. This is the simulation of our magnetosphere from September 24, 2014. Colors and flow lines represent the directions and velocities of plasma. Blue regions show areas where particles are escaping from the ionosphere. But this is a view of only one plane. We're looking at Earth from the side, XZ plane. But we can see the breaches as well when we will look at the planet from above, XY plane. There are no doubts as for the direction of plasma currents. Escaping plasma can be seen as well on the frontal view. We can even see the directions of outflow. Zyganenko magnetosphere field lines don't match perfectly with the MHD simulation, but even here we can see the areas of plasma outflow. But if this is not enough, we can easily track the outflows on SWMF plus RCM monitors. escape point appears in the front of magnetopause just before a plasma bubble appears on the Y-cut monitor. Now, some better information. According to the data from publication, the rate of oxygen outflow is much lower than during previous geomagnetic reversals. However, there is a part which I can't agree with. From the research, we can learn that the rate of oxygen outflow is much bigger during the time of increased solar activity. But this is not exactly what we can see on the real-time magnetosphere monitors. For example, on December 11th, the geomagnetic activity was relatively low. But when we will look at the SWMF plus RCM simulation from this day, we will see that the amount of plasma bubbles which leave the magnetosphere doesn't differ that much from the times of increased geomagnetic activity. And this leads me to a different conclusion. But first, let's see what is the official version of the connection between geomagnetic reversals and mass extinction. This is what NASA is telling us about this subject. If the magnetic field disappeared entirely, the planet would be bathed in radiation from the Sun, which would likely cause an increase in cancer, but the Earth's atmosphere would still protect us from majority of radiation. Funny that they didn't say anything about the possibility that the weakening geomagnetic field will likely make the atmosphere to shrink. Increased solar radiation would ionize neutral particles which would leave the planet, as there wouldn't be a magnetic force which would keep them trapped in the magnetosphere. Their conclusions are: there is a pretty good chance it won't happen in our lifetime, and maybe not for hundreds of thousands of years, and even if the Earth's poles flip, it wouldn't be the end of the world. You might need to take a Sharpie on your compass though. Very nice. However, data which I was showing you couple minutes before tells something completely different. But let's look at the first statement in this article. First, there is no secret planet hurtling through the solar system, causing chaos and orbital disturbances. Dear NASA, I would love to believe you, but considering the claims about possible effects of geomagnetic reversal, I have to treat your statements with a small dose of skepticism. Of course, if there would be an additional celestial body within the solar system, it would cause coupled effects. For example, we would see unusual numbers of meteors. Here is a small graph showing the amount of fireballs reports since 2005 till 2013. Of course, some people like D5UNCR will say that the amount of fireballs doesn't grow at all, and it's just more people reporting them than before. That's why I will show you part of the movie which was uploaded by Nano63A a couple weeks ago.
To Texas, where the night sky lit up and so did the 911 phone lines. Police fielding hundreds of calls from people who saw a blazing fireball or who heard what sounded like an explosion.
You can see the fireball on this dash cam video and look at it here on this police cruiser cam. NASA confirming to ABC News it was a meteor, 4 feet long, 4,000 pounds, traveling 55,000 miles per hour.
It looked like it was across, like in towards Mexico.
Just last week, people in several states saw fireballs racing through the sky. And overseas, check out this one streaking over Japan. And right now, the time to be looking up. 3 different meteor showers peppering Earth, meaning we'll see more of these images that are out of this world.
But there is another kind of influence which should affect planets in solar system, if there would be a celestial guest in the neighborhood. Because of its gravitation, we would see some disturbances of the orbit and spin axis of Earth. Although I can't confirm any changes of the orbit shape, I've learned recently that the rotational axis of Earth is changing. In the publication called Geodetic Vertical Velocities Affected by Recent Rapid Changes in Polar Motion, we can learn that the geographic poles are changing their placement just as the geomagnetic ones. And to make it more funny, disturbances of the polar motion started to speed up since 2010, year which I've pointed out in previous episodes as the one in which began the anomalies of magnetosphere. Because of this disturbance, the height of crust changed by 3 mm in some regions of Earth. Those images show the evolution of this process since the beginning of 21st century. And this is the last publication which I would like to show you. Although it is connected with the subject of this movie only partially, it is very interesting, as it explains a connection which even I wouldn't expect to find. According to the data presented in this article, there seems to be a correlation between the concentration of sulfate aerosols in the atmosphere and the length of the day. Sulfate aerosols are responsible for the strongest anomalies of atmospheric energy distribution, what can affect the rotation of planet. Of course, the change of time is measured in milliseconds, what means that we won't be capable to notice the difference. But it shows that in universe everything can affect everything. It is still too early to tell if the disturbances of magnetosphere moved to another level, but it is the second time in last couple days when I see this anomaly at similar time. But let's look at the readings. All open field lines which were connected to the northern pole turned into closed ones around 2:30 UTC. This caused a visible increase of plasma density in the northern lobe of magnetotail. If you will look closer, you will see a loop of plasma which emerged from the equatorial belt and turned back to the North Polar Cap. Similar plasma loops can be seen quite often on our star during some of solar eruptions. Couple words for the end. If I would have to compare the current situation of Earth to something, I would use a spinning top which is losing the stability. So I don't think that the pole shift entered its final phase. But don't ask me when it will happen. I'm not Nancy Lider and I won't make any predictions as for the date. To be honest, I can't even tell you what can happen during the process. However, I can guess couple effects which can be a sign of increasing disturbances. Some animals, like whales or migrating birds, are pretty sensitive to the changes of magnetic field, so we can expect that they can start to behave irrational when the poles will start to shift for real. We can as well expect some changes of the weather patterns, as the circulation of polar air depends on the geomagnetic field. Problem is that we can see those signs taking place already. But as I said before, do not trust me and make some research by yourself. There is only one opinion which should matter for you, your own. Be sure that you looked at the subject from all possible perspectives before you will make up your mind. And with this advice I will finish this movie. Class dismissed. Be safe. Peace.